Thank you, Greg. And thank you to the Women's Center, to Campus Police, and to the Criminal Justice Institute, Mr. Greg Truhan, for having me here today. This is a very important issue personally to me, as you heard. This presentation in part is credited to Dr. Celia Williamson. She is the Executive Director of the Human Trafficking and Social Justice Institute at the University of Toledo. Much of this information is from her and many people that I have learned from, including my daughter Courtney, over the past several years. I would like to tell you that there may be some triggering slides. This does contain sexual content. It's meant for ages 13 and up. I do offer a youth program through the schools which is separate, and of course it's age appropriate. So keep that in mind, and if you need to leave, get a drink of water, step away for a moment, you are welcome to come back, but please take care of yourself. I imagine most of you have heard about human trafficking. Otherwise you would not be here, or you're curious to learn what it is. There are a lot of myths about human trafficking, and it's important that we learn from researchers, from professionals, from government sites about what human trafficking really is. Children are not often kidnapped. Adults are not thrown into vans with zip ties. Not that those things can't happen, but really human trafficking is more often hidden in plain sight and often very misunderstood. So there's federal laws and state laws. I'm not an attorney, but I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of the different definitions according to federal law. Sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, providing, or obtaining a person for commercial sex act. It's essentially exploiting somebody for profit. Often those victims are either induced by force, fraud, or coercion. They're manipulated, they're tricked. Traffickers use substances to control their victims. Either they introduce them to substances or they fuel their drug habit to keep them in the game, or in the life as it's known. Labor trafficking, believe it or not, does happen here in Ohio. There have been reports, I've worked with fire and EMS, and there have been reports. There was a nursery where it was a fertilizer, was underground, and they were living underground, and they were rescued. Or I shouldn't say rescued. Sometimes survivors don't like the word rescue. They were recovered because they want to be empowered. They want to live their life. And oftentimes for survivors, their trafficking, their abuse is only a fraction of who they really are. They want to be known for their talents. They want to work. They want to have shelter. They want everything that all of us want, just a normal life. It can involve men, women, and youth from the US and from all over the world. So as I mentioned, human trafficking is happening here in Ohio, in Lake County. It's not something that you see over there or that happens to other people. It's known as modern day slavery. And how many human trafficking slaves are in the world today? A lot. It's estimated to be 40.3 million, according to the Global Slavery Index from 2018. So human trafficking is difficult to measure. Here are some numbers from Ohio, from the Ohio Attorney General's office. And the reason that the data are hard to come by is because not all victims identify as human trafficking victims. Not all victims report to law enforcement, and that's their right. However, these are the actual cases that were in the state of Ohio from 2021. There are social and economic factors that make someone vulnerable to human trafficking. This can include, and according to the Ohio Attorney General's report, some of them that were listed are criminal history, drug and alcohol, other dependency, runaway. Runaway is actually the #1 risk factor for youth and adults, because how else are they going to obtain what they need? Food, clothing, shelter, cell phone, communication, transportation. LGBTQ+, also very vulnerable. All of us have vulnerabilities. We all need something. We all want something. Maybe it's a relationship, and traffickers prey on victims who have those vulnerabilities or have those needs. As far as transportation goes, movement is not a requisite. That means that somebody does not have to be moved to be a human trafficking victim. Sometimes children and adults are victimized in their own homes, in their own residences. There's a variety of places, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So who are the traffickers? Traffickers are pimps. So what many of us think of as prostitution, if it's pimp controlled, it's human trafficking. Labor traffickers are employers that traffic employees. They manipulate them. There's that word again. It's about manipulation. They force them to work. Sometimes they take their ID. My daughter was a victim, and her ID was often missing because they acquired her ID. And without an ID, it's difficult to do many things. Those charged with trafficking may face felony charges, and if convicted, face years in prison. And again, here's the vulnerabilities. Who is most at risk? We saw the page from the Ohio Attorney General's office. Instability with living, domestic violence, sexual abuse, history makes them vulnerable. If there's a caregiver or a family member who has a substance use issue, parents can sometimes traffic their children for drug money. That's just one scenario. It's very sad. And of course, when those youth may go missing, they may not be reported as missing. So even our missing persons reports are not 100% accurate because not every missing person is reported, especially, sometimes in adults. Undocumented immigrants are vulnerable, poverty, history of sexual abuse, as I mentioned, addiction for drugs or alcohol. And this is my daughter, Courtney. She is my why. And I'm showing you this picture of her because if you saw her on the street throughout her victimization, you would never have known that she was a human trafficking victim. She saw medical providers, mental health providers. She was hospitalized in a nursing home because she had dropped foot after being in a coma, a drug-induced coma, because her trafficker had given her substances. Nobody knew what human trafficking was. I didn't know what human trafficking was. So to the outside world, she looked like an ordinary woman. As I mentioned earlier, it's often hidden in plain sight. So most importantly, if you think somebody is a victim of human trafficking, you don't want to interdict unless you're law enforcement, but you do want to call the Cuyahoga Regional, well actually now it's the Northeast Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force, care of the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department, and that number is 216-443-6085. And we do have some Lake County detectives who have joined the task force. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is excellent for survivors and victims if they need resources, and that number is here, 888-3737-888. However, there's some debate on whether or not they report to law enforcement. According to Polaris, they do report to law enforcement if a victim wants to report, which is what we would hope. And again, here's Courtney, my why. You can see her transformation. So when I said, if you looked at her, you wouldn't realize she was a human trafficking victim, you wouldn't. You would think that she assimilated with her environment. And you can see here how she changed from going to a dance to a family party, and then when she was on the streets in Michigan before she was recovered. So a little bit more about labor trafficking. What does it look like? It could be domestic servitude, which could be a commercial cleaning service, sweatshops, factories, panhandling. I bet you didn't expect to see that. My daughter, when she was in Michigan, had a quota, and her supposed husband didn't care how she brought home her quota each day. So I said, how did you make money? And she said, I would beg on the street, I would get money, and then I would go to a convenience store and buy snacks and drinks and sell them to people as they were leaving the bars. This was before COVID. She didn't explain the other things that she did. She told me she danced on the street, which doesn't surprise me because my daughter loved to dance. She was found by a police officer in Colorado, Brush, Colorado, and she said she was going to California to be a dancer. And unfortunately, the officer believed her because she was an adult and thought that she really was, going to pursue some type of dancing career, which was not the case. Anyway, here's some other examples. Restaurant, food service. If people are living in their restaurants or in massage parlors, that's usually an indicator. If there's, food in those parlors, we've seen that here in Ohio. Nail salons. And this isn't to say that everything you see here is human trafficking. You just have to know what it looks like and where to look and when to contact the authorities. This isn't to, everything you see isn't human trafficking. Getting a job. Courtney often told me that people were offering her jobs, modeling jobs. They weren't real. People were trying to manipulate her. And often, even for labor trafficking, sometimes it's a false promise of a job. Nurses have come from other countries and been put in strip clubs all over the country in news reports that I've seen. There's construction can be labor trafficking as well, especially if there is a disaster. If there's a chance to if there's an opportunity to take advantage of somebody, unfortunately, there are some people who do. But fortunately, there are some good people out there. So just make sure if you or any of your family members, if you have children, if they're looking for a job or a temporary job, make sure it's legitimate. Look at the Better Business Bureau. Do your homework. So federal law, sex trafficking of youth is when an underage person provides sexual services in exchange for anything. It can be money, shelter, food, drugs, clothes, or any other items. I've been told that there was one victim who exchanged sex for McDonald's, just to have a meal. Now we talk about state law. It's a little bit different, but it's more aligned with the federal law than it had been. There used to be a tiered law for Ohio where 16 and 17-year-olds didn't have the same protection as younger minors. And now anybody under the age of 18 who is victimized is a human trafficking victim. There's no need to prove force, fraud, or coercion. It's human trafficking. So some examples, as I mentioned, some of this is somewhat repetitive, but anything they need. Sometimes if a mom is having difficulty paying a bill, a landlord may offer her money in exchange for sex or in exchange for, labor. Unfortunately, these aren't the things we see, unless it's somebody that you know. Some red flags, I wish I could tell you that there are red flags, and if you saw them, you would know that that's a human trafficking victim. That's not the case. You have to know the person. I'm not saying that some things can't be obvious if it looks like a domestic violence dispute, or if in the medical profession, if any of you, go on to become medical professionals, if there's a controlling person with a patient, there are signs, but it depends on where you are. There are different signs in different venues. Hotels, there are different signs in hotels. For me, it was the change of my daughter's behavior. It was her acquiring multiple devices. And she was so charming, she would just tell me that, oh, a friend gave it to me. And unfortunately, my daughter thought everyone was a friend, and they were not. Again, here's the list of risk factors that we saw on the Ohio Attorney General's report, but this is spelled out a little bit more. We saw the numbers, but here are the actual vulnerabilities listed out. And I never thought that we had gangs in Lake County. I'm from the west side of Cleveland, and I grew up, and I knew that gangs existed. But I'll show you later in one of the slides that I have that there's intersectionality oftentimes between human trafficking and other crimes. It can be, sometimes the traffickers can force their victims to steal, to commit fraud. Sometimes the victims are arrested for substance use issues. And there are concurrent issues such as medical issues, mental health issues, substance use disorders. Vulnerability. As I mentioned, runaway is the #1 risk factor. So where are youth and adults recruited? Usually right here. Sometimes, I should say. It can be shopping malls. It can be high schools and colleges. Boyfriend, girlfriend, we need some money for our rent. Juvenile detention, jail, group homes, shelters. My daughter was not recruited from a group home, but she often went missing from a group home and was manipulated to leave. And as I mentioned, internet social networking sites and apps. The most dangerous place for us and our children is actually on our phones, trusting strangers. Always be aware. Who recruits youth, young adults into sex trafficking? Everybody, anybody. It could be a girl who has a trafficker recruiting another girl. It can be women. It can be a boy who's a member of a gang, and that might be his job to recruit victims. It could be a man acting as a boyfriend or a friend. So the recruitment process starts with manipulation, gifts and compliments, and then they build up the victim's self-esteem. And then after that, they break them down. They can be violent. Not always. Sometimes they are called Romeo pimps, and they romance their victims. But they do aim for control in one way or the other, whether it is through violence or through manipulation. And they create dependencies. Nobody's going to believe you. If you tell the police, they won't believe you. You need me. And so here's a picture of what looks like a boyfriend and a girlfriend, the manipulation. And then, as I showed you before, there's Courtney before she went missing in May, and how much she transformed just within a few months when she was recovered from Michigan. And she also changed her name, which made it difficult for us to find her. She truly was hidden in plain sight. And she went by the name Erica Kane. So I have some questions for you, and I don't expect you to answer them, but I really want you to think about it. Has anyone here ever had any experiences in person or online that made you feel uncomfortable? Have you ever had an email, social media, or other account that your parents and or friends didn't know about? As I mentioned, I show this to youth and in the kids in schools, and oftentimes I can tell if they have done that by the looks on their faces. Is anyone here friends on social media with someone you don't know? Have you ever posted pictures or sent messages that include personal information or location, even by accident? It's important to teach our kids this too. If they're wearing something from their school, that's an identifier. And again, this is targeted towards youth, but adults can do this too. We don't want to try to add friends, get likes, or followers. And I'm sure most of you know that once something is posted or sent electronically, it can be stored or saved even after you delete it. This is really interesting for when Snapchat first came out. People thought that that it disappeared, it was gone, and clearly it was not. And now they've changed it, and people can screenshot and everything else. So just be careful what you send. And do you know that some people may not be who they appear to be? So sadly, human trafficking is not the only victimization that we see here in Ohio. Here's a picture of a young man from Streetsboro who took his own life because he was being extorted. And his family has shared this story because not only are young girls being targeted online, but boys are too. And I thought, as my daughter aged, nobody's going to want to harm her. She's getting older. She's an adult. Why would they want to manipulate her? Well, they did. And I thought the same thing about teenage boys. Oh, teenage boys, they're not going to fall for a trick. Well, they are if the person is pretending to be a female, and they trick them into sending nude photos, and then they extort them for money. And sadly, this is not the only example of a young man who took his own life because of this victimization. And again, this is not human trafficking. However, exploitation, sextortion, human trafficking, it's all victimization of people with vulnerabilities, whether we realize they have vulnerabilities or not. This was a high school athlete getting ready to go to college. Nobody would have expected that vulnerability from him. At least I wouldn't have. As I mentioned, recruiting victims online is real. Keep yourself safe. I'm sure most of you know this. Only chat with people you know. Don't meet people that you engage with online, and don't give out your personal information. Exploitation and sex trafficking online. Anybody that uses an app, especially if there's a chat feature, there is a danger for exploitation or exploitation leading to human trafficking. The average age at which a child gets a cell phone in the US is 10 years old. 20 to 30% of kids have reported being cyberbullied in their lifetime, and reports of online exploitation of children has increased over 97% last year. That was as of December 2022. ICAC is very involved with protecting our youth. Here's some resources, numbers, information that you can call, and these slides will be provided. If there are instances where a child sends a nude photo, an adult sends a nude photo, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children will help. All you have to do is call. And even for adults, there's something now, and I can't remember which is which, but one of them is Take It Down. So there's not only help for youth, but also help for adults, because somebody may have done something when they were a teenager, sent a picture to a boyfriend, and then somebody else got their hands on it, and now they're being exploited and they want to find a job. Just know that there's help available. And don't be afraid to tell your parents, to tell your friends, to tell law enforcement. They are not going to punish you for seeking help. Not in this case anyway. Here's the couple local stories. As I mentioned, human trafficking is happening here. The Northeast Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force has made it a priority with the Ohio Attorney General to reduce human trafficking in Ohio and prevent victimization. And it surprised me to see the post by the Lake County Sheriff's Office about cartel shipments. So apparently the drugs are coming through Lake County and are being dispersed throughout Northeast Ohio. So anywhere you have a zip code, anywhere you have drugs, you can have human trafficking. So this story does not link the two together, but I just wanted to explain that sometimes there is an intersection, as there was with my daughter. So why don't victims seek help? As I mentioned, talk to police. Don't be afraid of arrest. Unfortunately, victims are. They're told, don't trust law enforcement. And it was proven to my daughter. She was arrested for substance use issues from drugs that were given to her by her trafficker. To date, no one has been charged with any crimes against her. She, as the victim, was the only person to serve jail, who was arrested and served jail time for missing a mental health court date. Victim-centered approach. So, no matter what you do in your professional life, and for students, as you venture out, whatever profession you become involved in, use a victim-centered approach. If you go to a primary care physician, you may see this from a nurse or a nurse practitioner or even a doctor. Law enforcement, they have CIT training for mental health crises. It's always important to use a victim-centered approach because you want human trafficking victims, sexual assault victims, domestic violence victims, and even those struggling with mental health issues and substance use issues to feel safe. But of course, you have to protect yourself as well. What can you do? Promote healthy coping skills, build self-confidence for yourself and for students, for anyone who's a teacher. Educate yourself and loved ones. Don't believe false news reports or things on social media. Check and see where they're coming from and the resources. And sometimes people are scared, so they report things out of fear. There's some great websites, Polaris Project, Shared Hope International, the Human Trafficking and Social Justice Conference, and that is Dr. Celia Williamson. You can join an anti-trafficking coalition in your community, which for me is the Alliance Against Human Trafficking. We just became a nonprofit, and we're trying to connect resources for victims. So here's a map of the Ohio Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. If you ever need help with a resource or have any questions for me, all you have to do is Google Ohio's Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition, look under Lake County, and the email and my cell phone number are listed there. So what do you do if you or a friend are being recruited or trafficked? Educate them, talk to a responsible adult, or, sorry, this is from my son's school, when he was in grade school, I forgot to take that out. Talk to somebody that you can trust. If you suspect somebody is being trafficked, don't stigmatize or blame the victim. And again, call the Northeast Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force. Make sure the friends you make are only interested in friendship. Have new friends and acquaintances and even coworkers earn your trust. Set boundaries. That includes physical, internet, and emotional safety. Consent. Again, this is more for youth, but it certainly applies to adults too. If you say no, no means no. Remove yourself from that situation. Ask, listen, respect, and leave. Even if it's a healthy relationship, if you have the right to feel safe and you can talk about it with your significant other at a later date, it's okay to walk away. Empower yourself to act. Take action, as I mentioned. Remove yourself from the situation. Talk your way out of the situation. You can be persuasive. Be assertive to stop a risky person or situation and ask for help or go get help. I would imagine on campus you can call campus police for an escort. I work at Cleveland State University and we can certainly do that. Always operate with safety in mind. And this comes from police training actually. It's the OODA loop. Orient yourself, operate in, sorry, I'm going to mess it up. I won't even try it. But always be aware of your surroundings. Have a charged phone. Know the people you hang out with. Know what you're eating, drinking, who you're going with, how to get there, and who is with you. My daughter often reported that people drugged her drinks, and there have been other reports of that as well. But they don't have to be drugged. Somebody can just give a victim alcohol to make them feel more comfortable, or give them substances to lower their inhibitions. If you're uncomfortable or unsure, speak up and leave. This is about positive self-identity. If we can teach our youth to have positive self-esteem, that's the first step. And as adults, we also have to have positive self-esteem because that takes away some of the vulnerabilities. You want to empower yourself. So see it for what it is. Don't beat yourself up. Ask yourself, what is it that I like and don't like about me? Find and focus on a way to create the changes you need to feel better about yourself. Empower yourself to create the change that is needed, and respond by working to change the way you think about yourself. So always, think positive in the way you behave towards yourself. So very scary for me, I attended a lot of webinars in doing my research and trying to learn as much as I could. And there was a trafficker who said that he would go to malls and he would say hello to a young woman or a boy walking past. And if the person said hello back and seemed to be confident, well, he wasn't worried about that person. But if somebody walked by and he said, "You look nice," and they said, "No, I don't," that's his target. He's looking for somebody who doesn't have self-esteem, somebody he can somebody he or she could manipulate to take control over, to lift up, to season, and then to break them down and manipulate them. And that doesn't mean that every person who says something nice is a human trafficker. As I said, you have to know your situation. So here are those numbers again. In the case of an immediate emergency, always call 911, or you can call the Northeast Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force. As I mentioned, it's through the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department, but they manage all the way from Cedar Point to Ashtabula and everywhere in between. And there are several task forces throughout Ohio. If you are traveling, you can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline to report a tip, but as I mentioned, they may not be able to get that to law enforcement. So you may want to call the local police there. And I am open to questions if anybody has any.
Tell us about, how you came to decide that was what you wanted to do, and then a little bit about the organization and what it's accomplishing in this area.
Absolutely. So when my daughter went missing in 2019, her case manager reached out to me. She had mental health issues and said, "Courtney's at risk. Call the Northeast Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force and talk to them because your daughter is vulnerable for human trafficking." And I said, "What is human trafficking?" And boy, did I learn, because her case manager was right. So I had difficulty finding resources in this area. I found Just Ask, which is an organization in Virginia that was started by Bill Wolf. And he had a curriculum, and I thought, okay, well, this needs to be taught. We need prevention. People need to understand this. And I reached out to them and I connected with them. And there was a mom by the name of Susan Young, whose daughter had reported to counselors, I can't even remember the amount of times, 40 times or something. It was a very high number. And nobody knew what human trafficking was. They didn't even have the laws on the book when her daughter was victimized. So she couldn't get the help that she needed. And she encouraged me, she talked with me while Courtney was missing, and that was how it started. And then I found Sister Ann Victory, who was the former director of education at the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking, who does amazing work in Cuyahoga County in Northeast Ohio. And I learned how to do presentations through her before she left and moved on to other things. And actually, this is kind of a long answer, but she, with her organization, being a sister, she had contacts in California, and one of her contacts actually cited Courtney in California one of the times that she had been missing. Because I reached out to her and I said, listen, I believe Courtney's in California, and here's a picture of her. And she said, yes, my contact did see her, but when she went back, she was gone. So, but it's just, I knew that we needed a network, and I knew that we needed a network. She has a national network, but I knew we needed something here because it was happening here. So through Sister Ann, she introduced me to Jenna Bing and Kathy Golnitz. Jenna Bing is very active in Lake County. I always say she knows everybody. If she doesn't know them, she'll introduce herself. And Kathy Golnitz is a retired forensic nurse. So Sister Ann said, the three of you have to meet. The three of you have to act now. And we thought, oh, well, can't we wait? She said, no, you got to get going. You got to get the momentum going, and you have to keep in touch with people that you touch throughout this process. So we did. And we started holding bi-monthly, so that was October of 2020. By March of 2021, we had our very first Zoom meeting, and still during the COVID stuff. And then we got brave and did hybrid. And we bring in guest speakers from all over Lake County, all over Ohio. And I've even brought in trainers from Missouri who did a law enforcement training at Cleveland State because it was skills training. So what I teach is awareness training, but there are professionals who teach skills training. I'm not law enforcement, I can't teach law enforcement. I can educate them and tell them what to be aware of and what happened to my daughter and what could be done. So that's how it started. So what we do now, we partner with community leaders all across locally, countywide, statewide, and even federally to try to get legislation enacted, to advocate for victims, to connect victims with resources, but we are not a direct service provider. So we simply just try to raise awareness through education, and because of that pursuit, I decided to apply to become a PhD student at Cleveland State, and my research focus is human trafficking. So I hope to take this to a college level. Virginia just passed a law in which orientation for the public universities has a human trafficking course for all incoming students. So I'm hoping to do something like that in Ohio because I think prevention is really important. There was another question?
How do you discourage an adult from getting involved in talking to people that they think are nice people on TikTok?
I wish I had an answer for that because I would have stopped my daughter. So I had parental controls on her cell phone, and I tried to stop her from talking to people. I had it so that she couldn't download apps like Kik, but she still found ways to talk to people, to meet people, and to get manipulated. She was crafty with searching. Maybe by listening, or either by watching an educational film, by attending a training, have that individual not just research it on TV or on the internet rather, but this presentation is being recorded, you can certainly share it. And it does not contain all the information that that adult will need. But as I mentioned, you can contact me and I'm happy to provide resources or talk with you or talk with that individual and maybe connect them with somebody who can explain the dangers of this and what's happening. Or our meetings are open to the public as well. You're certainly welcome to come to one of our meetings. If you reach out to that email, I can put you on our email list, and you're both invited. You're welcome to come. Maybe seeing the professionals and hearing about what's really happening may discourage them, is my hope.
Thank you.
Certainly. Yes?
This is kind of like a two-part question. Does it always happen really fast, or is it more of like a slow process where the victimizer is trying to
It can be both. So, and unfortunately, I got a civil protection order against one of Courtney's traffickers. I couldn't stop all of them. And there were all different MOs. One pretended to be her friend, one pretended to be her husband. Some, I have no idea. I don't know all the details. And I think some people took care of her. So as you saw, her hair was braided when she was in Michigan. Somebody took care of her, somebody helped her. So I don't know if that was somebody that was involved with her husband, or if she made friends on her own and it was truly somebody who had genuine interest in care. Clearly she ate and she survived. So I wish I could tell you that there's a process or a way to look for, but it's subtle, and it can be somebody can date for a while and then change. Just like with any relationship, they could build up that trust and relationship and just say, oh, you know what, we need some rent money, maybe you could help me out. Or, hey, if you really love me, you'll be with my friend. But it can be abusive or violent, or in the case of my daughter, she was sexually assaulted at gunpoint by drug dealers. So it wasn't always gradual. Sometimes it was instantaneous, and that's in her medical records.
Is it always include sexual acts, or could it be like even an underage person not being aware of photographs that they're sending could be used as child pornography?
So that's exploitation, and that's where ICAC gets involved, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Youth. So Courtney was exploited, which led to human trafficking. So they're not always dependent on each other. They can be independent of one another, or one could lead to the other, or vice versa. So that list of resources on the slide, I'd be happy to provide that too. If you, I don't know if I have my contact information up here. I don't, but I'll be sure to provide that. Like I said, if you look at the coalition map, I'm easy to find, and you can certainly reach out to the Women's Center, or the Criminal Justice Center, or the police department and get my contact information. And it's real simple. It's just allianceagainstht.com. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, at gmail.com. Any other questions? Go ahead.
When your daughter was in the coma, were you able to go and see her?
Yes. So that was before I realized she was a victim, and she was being manipulated with substances. And there was a man who after she passed away, I found a prescription vial of Adderall, which was something that she was prescribed, but it wasn't her prescription. And in her medical records, one time when she was hospitalized, she said that he gave her so much Adderall that they called it candy. So I don't know what substance she had, if it was Adderall when she was in the coma, but she literally walked through fire and ended up, because of the drugs, was in a coma and ended up in the nursing home because of drop foot. And she was that was before I even realized what was happening. I just thought she had a substance use issue. So I guess if I could leave you all with one thing, look beneath the surface, don't victim blame, and understand that somebody who has a substance use issue, somebody who's shy, somebody who is seeking out friends, just see the person, especially in different professions that you deal with them, with students. Students report most often to teachers next to moms, and victims don't identify. They don't know it's human trafficking. So there's screening tools available, and if you ask somebody, have you ever exchanged something of value for sex, or given pictures? Sometimes they get tricked into, to answer your question about that, sometimes they get tricked into getting gift cards, or people will send them money for pictures. So that's absolutely something that should be reported to police. But just be aware, you might be the one person who encounters a victim, and if your instincts are telling you that something is off or something is wrong, ask someone who knows, reach out, find the resources. It's not unusual for me to get phone calls from providers who say, okay, I have a situation, I can't tell you any personal information, but who do I call? And I give them resource information, because I can't help them, but I know many people who can. Any other questions? I believe our chief is coming up. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Steve Gagliardi. I'm the campus police department chief of police. Definitely want to extend my thanks to Carolyn for coming and speaking about her daughter's story and her family story. It takes a lot of strength to get up here and talk in general. I can't imagine what it is to talk on a personal level and share with perfect strangers, but that shows how much this means to Carolyn. She's taking on a very insurmountable topic that every day gets more and more traction, whether it's Lake County, Northeast Ohio, or the United States. And it has many different faces. So, thank you. I apologize for not being here in the beginning of the presentation, so thanks to Greg Truhan for providing the intro. I'd also want to thank the Women's Center as well in participation with us and the Criminal Justice Program for bringing Carolyn in. And we're definitely going to have more Carolyn in the Alliance probably in the fall. So keep your eye out, whether it's internally through email, our Facebook page, what have you. But if you enjoyed today, please stick around, and if you have any questions you'd like to personally one-on-one talk to Carolyn about, please do so. We have room for probably about another 45 minutes, and there's plenty of coffee, water, and or cookies outside. But I genuinely want to say thank you. This is a great showing, and hope you all have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.